Hello everyone. This is a brief video overview showing some good practices for what I think everybody should do to get good feedback from one of the AI platforms on your current draft. So before I start, let me say that I'm in Gemini and I use the highest model available to me for this chat thread, which is Gemini Pro. And in general, when you go into a chat platform, you want to be using the highest model available to you. The exception to that would be Claude, and I'll talk about Claude in another video, but that one, their medium model, is good enough, and it's the one that's available on the free tier. But okay, so one of the first things that you want to do when you're in a chat thread getting feedback on a draft is you obviously want to upload the draft, which I have here. If you have a text that it's based on, you want to upload that so that it can draw from that when it needs to reference something. To be able to have a conversation with you about that. And then I also have the assignment sheet. Now you could leave out the assignment sheet if you wanted, and you could just describe very specifically what the assignment is. But if you have enough context in your given chat platform, then you can upload all three. And Gemini's pretty good about that. It's got a big context window for that. So one of the very first things that you want to do, the very first prompt that you make is one of the most important, because this is where you tell it who you are, what you're doing, what the assignment is, how you want the conversation to go, what kind of help or feedback you want. Basically, you lay down the parameters of how you want it to of how you want the whole thing to run. So one of the first things you want to do is just say I'm a student in a rhetoric class and kind of give it the general context. We're writing a paper about the played out. I'd like you to act as a tutor and thought partner to help me think about areas I can revise to the execution of the argument. So it's really important to assign a role, a tutor, a thought partner, a conversation partner, writing coach. Any of those are fine, and you kind of giving it the purpose of the session. Now these are my personal preferences here. Obviously you'll modify them for yours, but basically you do want to have a back and forth where you're the driving agent behind everything. You want to avoid, don't ever upload anything and just say give me feedback. Because if you do, it will give you feedback, but it'll give you a wall of feedback. It'll be more like a list, and then it feels like it's more like something you're supposed to just go do. Like, okay, here's what it said, here's what I go do. And there's kind of like no thinking, no conversation, no pushback. So what I really want to see is a conversation of some kind. And I want to see evidence that you know the play really well. I want to see evidence that you know your paper very well, and that you can defend some of the choices that you're making if it gives you a suggestion that you need to push back on. Doesn't mean you need to have all the answers, but you need to be really mentally engaged in the process of writing and reading, writing the paper and reading the play in order for this to give you the best outcome in the feedback session. And so I tell it I want this to be a natural conversation, and I don't want a wall of feedback in one go, nor do I want bullet points that tell me what to do or what to argue. So it's very important that you establish boundaries and you tell it what you want it to do and what you don't want it to do. And so for me and for us, I'm telling Gemini, I don't want you to do my thinking for me. I want you to elicit things from me and ask questions that make me think or send me back to the text. I want to lead the conversation as much as possible based on the questions or uncertainties I have, but it's fine for you to also identify things that I don't raise or I haven't considered. I also have some sample paragraphs provided by my professor if you want to see models of the kind of thing we're supposed to do in our papers. The first thing I'd like to focus on is the overarching structure, the topic sentences for each body point. My professor has pointed out how important it is for each section to have a clear, simply stated, provable claim that's open to discussion and debate. All right, so that's all the context. That's all I'm giving it. It's the parameters, what not to do, what to do. And then now I'm also bundling with that my first question. So I wanted to focus on topic sentences because those are, I want to look at the big picture things first. And I always look at things like the introduction, topic sentences, because do you have the structure? Do you have the points established for you to even make an argument? Now, you've written the paper, so you should already know the answer to that, but it's possible for all of us to have topic sentences in some sections, but not others. And it's also important for us to remember that a body section in a paper can be more than one paragraph. And you'll see, if you read this thread carefully, you'll see that I had to point that out to Gemini when it questioned or challenged something that I had. And I said, well, yeah, but you can have a point that goes on for more than one paragraph. And it says, oh, yeah, that's true. So you have to, I think the single most important thing to remember when you're having a conversation with AI is you have to know what it is that you're doing, what it is that you're talking about. It doesn't mean that you have to go in with full confidence that everything is perfect in your paper, but you're coming to it kind of with a good sense of what you've done and a sense of what questions you have, what uncertainties you have, and things like that. So I always start with big structure type things, because if the structure's not in place, then everything else kind of falls apart. So I started with the topic sentences, and I said, which topic sentences or which sections, if any, are missing a topic sentence that makes a provable claim. And so that's how I started the conversation. Now, I'm not going to read the whole thread, but I'm going to highlight a few important things. So the very first thing that Gemini tells me is that about half of the paper has sections with topic sentences that it claims are missing a topic sentence. And so when we read the thread, you'll see that some of that's true. And then you'll see there's other places where it argues that there's not one there when there really is. And sometimes there's a reason why it missed that, because the parts of the paper are written in a narrative mode in places, so it could make it easy for somebody or even a chat bot to miss. But then when you go back and you're like, no, look, it's right there. It'll say, oh yeah, that's right. And then you have conversations about it. And the idea when you're getting the feedback from an AI tutor or from a human tutor or a classmate or even from me is no matter who gives you any advice, or it gives you feedback, not necessarily advice, but anytime you get feedback on something, you receive it, you listen to it, but you have to evaluate it yourself to determine whether it's any good. And so that's one of the biggest values of getting the feedback, is not the feedback itself, but your ability to look at it and determine which piece of feedback is worth considering, which ones should I discard, which ones should I push back on, and things like that. So if we go through here, I pointed out something because it identified a sentence that was at the very beginning of a section that is descriptive and it's not a debatable claim. And I said, okay, but before I think about rewriting anything, my professor said that a topic sentence won't always be the very first line. She said it could have some lead into it, but that ideally a topic sentence should be near the beginning of a body section. I said, I just wanted to clarify that before we move on. And it says, oh yeah, you're right, that's true. Let's apply that to your draft. But notice that it's not giving me any answer here. It's kind of giving me, it's prompting me to come up with a topic sentence that would fit for that particular section. So let's see. It says your second paragraph is a perfect example of this. It opens with solid context about Catholic school uniform requirements and then transitions into highly specific focus on the boy's fingernails, points out that Father Flynn's behavior is odd, but it stops short of arguing exactly what this behavior proves about his guilt. And it says, take your time to think about how you want to frame it. Whenever you're ready to share your thoughts, let's talk about it. And so here's what I did. Again, I'm pretending to be the student who wrote this paper. I said, okay, I see your point. It doesn't prove anything or contribute to his guilt per se, but his fixation on the boy's cleanliness and the fact that he points out that his own fingernails are long, but that it's okay because they're clean, is weird. And when you look at the play through the lens of he's guilty, it especially stands out as odd. Long fingernails are more of a feminine trait, and this could be a place where he's trying to normalize something to the boys in general. My thought was that this section could sort of help establish the idea of grooming behavior or something that's grooming adjacent. In the movie version of the play, when he walks around the circle with his nails, William London flinches and has a look of disdain or disapproval. And then I ask, is this a viable point? Or if so, is the placement off? Because I'm trying to describe to Gemini what the thought was, but I also see Gemini's point that, okay, as it stands right now, it's not really proving anything. It's not really, so I need to think about that, and I need to think about the topic sentence. And it says, oh, it's absolutely viable. But then it points out something that I hadn't noticed, right? And it says, well, do you think that section would be better next to a later section you have on where where you're arguing that Donald is being groomed? And I'm like, oh wow, I didn't think of that. Yes, I think I should move that. So it's a conversation, and I'm making decisions on the fly. And I don't even have to make decisions in the moment of the conversation, but I do have to be mentally present. And I also have to know when to push back, because it did, when it was validating the claim, it said, oh yeah, the whole boundary testing thing with Father Flynn is, is a good point to have. And I said, okay, but I don't like that phrasing, because that's a very AI thing to say, the boundary. It was just a weird way of, not that it's lofty or anything, but I would never frame it that way. And I think it's a bit of a stretch to say that that particular scene is testing any boundaries. It's not. I think I can make an argument that that leans toward that, but I think I can frame it in a better way. And you'll see when you look at this, because I don't want to end up reading all of this, but you'll see my thought process is that I'm going through pretending to be the student who wrote this, and I'm actually thinking through. This is my real thoughts in the moment, and because I can't just like snap off a topic sentence just cold. I have to think about it. It takes me a bit to do it. So what I liked is I had this space to think about that, and I said, I don't like that phrasing, and I want to develop the line myself. Now, to credit Gemini, it didn't actually give me the line, but it gave some AI phrasing that if I had used in my paper, it probably would have suggested that I got the idea from that. And the feedback session is really, yeah, you might get some suggestions from AI, but you never want to be fed ideas by AI, because then the paper's not really yours. You're just getting somebody else to tell you what to write, and then you're trying to execute that or whatnot. Okay, so here I knew that for this section I wanted to riff off of a line that Father Flynn says to Sister James later in the play, and he tells her that the most innocent actions can appear sinister to a poisoned mind, or something pretty close to that. But for this section, I want to say the opposite, because he's in front of the boys in the basketball scene, and I wanted to riff off the idea that sometimes, evil evil actions can appear wholesome to innocent minds, which is true, because kids are so innocent. You can do something that seems innocent, seems harmless on the surface, and maybe it is in that interaction. There's really nothing in that whole basketball scene that's terribly damning by itself, and it could be recast in somebody else's paper as something that's perfectly harmless and whatnot. But I'm trying to think through like what I want to do, what I want to accomplish with this section. And I said, I want to have a line that does something like that says that evil actions can appear wholesome to innocent minds. I want to say that predators plant seeds, that they do small, subtle things that accumulate over time to gain trust, and that this scene is likely the first place in the play where we actually see that. And so then as I'm thinking about that, I'm forming the idea for a possible topic sentence. Everyone knows a sad truth at the root of every pedophile's success. He has to take pains to gain trust and normalize behaviors that aren't normal. In Father Flynn's case, the basketball scene is likely the first place that we see evidence of that. So that's my idea for a topic sentence in that section right now. And so notice how Gemini acknowledges that I was right about the boundary testing thing. It says, okay, I'll dispense with the jargon. We talk about grouping the two sections together, and we talk about my idea. But then it calls me out and it says, oh, but your line, everyone knows the sad truth at the root of every pedophile's success. So it basically calls me out, saying that I've made a burden of proof fallacy, which was warned against in the assignment sheet, and it claims that that falls into the burden of proof fallacy, which is not true. And so you got to see. But if you don't know that, then you'll just say, okay, I didn't know that. And I said, okay, that's not the burden of proof fallacy, though. You overreach. The burden of proof fallacy for this paper would be for either side to say Father Flynn is innocent because Sister Aloysius has no proof, or that Father Flynn is guilty because he can't prove his innocent. That's the burden of proof fallacy. And I explained what I was meaning with that line. I said, everybody who knows what a pedophile is, or that pedophiles exist, knows the sad truth of how and why they're successful. It's because they work so hard to gain the trust of young, innocent children, and it's a common thing. And I said, that's not a burden of proof thing. It says, oh, you're completely right. I stand corrected. So this is one of the single most important lessons of any AI thread. I can always tell which students are fully mentally present, which ones know all the things that were in the lessons, or just know things in general, and can push back when necessary. And so this is what happens all the way through the thread. I'm going to let you go through the rest. And when you're getting feedback on a draft, you don't have to get feedback on everything under the sun, because you probably won't even have time to address everything under the sun. But you want enough information so that you have something to work with, so that you can make meaningful content-based revisions on your draft, not surface level things and things of that nature. Now, there are other things that you can do here, and there's not a magic number of questions. What I used to do in the past, and sometimes I still do, is I'll create a list of random questions that are just kind of from the vantage point of, like, I'm a hypothetical student, and I'll ask some general questions that could apply to anybody's draft. But really, everybody's conversation with AI will be different, because everybody's paper is different. Everybody's strengths are different. Everybody's weaknesses are different in a given paper. And so it's very unique to each person. And if you ever don't get good feedback from AI, it's generally because of the way it was prompted. So the way to get good feedback from AI is to stay in charge, to think critically, to lead the conversation. Don't be a passive recipient that just says, oh, give me feedback, tell me what to do, tell me what to think, tell me what to argue. And if you do it right, it should be kind of fun, because it's dynamic, it's interactive. And then when you get the full thread, what I recommend is that you either print it out, or you get a spiral notebook out so you can jot down the things that you want to take a look at or do in your paper, or you can split your screen and keep that on one side and look at your draft in others. But when you get feedback from humans too, from your peers and your classmates, you'll want to print those out and circle the things that you want to take a look at in your draft, and cross through the things that you disagree with. But this thread right here, I pretty much only asked about topic sentences until I kind of figured out. Then I said, okay, let's go to the meat of the argument. Let's look at the arguments themselves. And then I love that Gemini really listened this time to the directions at the beginning, because it says, okay, well, which body section do you want to start with? And so I picked one. And yeah, you could go through them one by one or whatever, but I picked one for a logical reason. When I was looking at it, and I got some good feedback, came to some good conclusions. But a lot of the good feedback that you get from AI are the ideas that it elicits from you, because it's acting kind of like a teacher or a tutor. It's pushing you back, saying, think about it. When you're ready, let's talk about it. Um, and it doesn't have to be a 40-page thread. Now, this one, when I turned it into a PDF, it was actually about 14 pages, and I only talked about topic sentences and had some back and forth on that, on a few of them. Then I redirected and said, okay, let's talk about body sections and developing those. And I ended up only talking about one because I didn't want the thread to go on too long. I've got more than enough to work with if I were a student revising my paper, and then I can still go back and have other conversations, other feedback sessions with AI, with humans, or whatever, to continue revising. So think of your papers as always a work in progress, and feedback is something for you to consider, never something for you to follow blindly. All right, that's it. That's a wrap. I'm going to stop this, and I've got one more to do, and then I'll get these out to the class and share the threads as well.